Hey everyone, it's Matt Brynildson and Eric Ponce here in the Temple of Barrels. This is Eric's domain once again, and it's where we always film because it's the quietest corner of the brewery. And today we're going to go through the other two beers of the Lion's Den collection. And as the name suggests, these are beers that are near and dear to the Lion. That is David Walker, our fearless leader. And of course, the two beers that we're going to go through are a variant on Double Barrel Ale and a variant on Walker's Reserve, which carries his namesake. Of course, Double Barrel Ale is the flagship of the brewery. It's the very first beer that we ever brewed before I or Eric were ever involved in the brewery. It incorporated wood barrels. And then later we did a twist on the theme, and we came up with Double Barrel Ale. In fact, Ali Razi, who you've met through these films, was instrumental in putting that recipe together. So is that the beer we're gonna start with?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with this beautiful 500 milliliter black smoked, opaque rye double barrel ale. You gonna open that for us?
Yes, let's open it.
And we're gonna pour it into this really elegant glass that Michaela found for us. It's the special glass for this series. And I'll give you a little background on brewing in this beer. So double barrel ale, I suppose stylistically would be a Imperial English bitter if there was such a thing, but it's definitely a barley wine class beer, which basically means that its original gravity is above 20 Plato. In order to get there, we use a massive malt charge, but we try to stick very close to the ratio of double barrel ale, which is Maris Otter as a base malt, at least a portion of it. It uses some Munich malt. It uses some crystal malts, and those are sourced from an English source. We used to use a lot of crisp malting. We've moved now to a lot of Simpson malting, but both of those are malt houses in the UK. The barleys coming from that region are very plump, and when it comes time to do the drumroll kilning, they're just perfect candidates for making really crystally, caramely malts. And then the twist on this version is that we added rye, because Eric knew that we were going to use rye whiskey barrels. I'll let him go into that, but incorporated almost 10% rye malt or malted rye in the recipe. And it always runs very well on the brew house. We've made this recipe for years and years. However, the last time we did the special version rye double barrel ale was, I believe, back, if I was told correctly, back in 2015. So double barrel ale comes out of the brew house. We pitch it with our house ale strain, which is a very fruity yeast strain. It produces a lot of beautiful esters. That fermentation goes very well. It produces a very high alcohol content in about the same time as a normal fermentation. And as you can see, it just has this gorgeous amber color. The general aroma of this beer as it comes off of stainless steel is fruity esters from the yeast, but also a ton of caramely, toffee-like characteristic from the malt. Basically everything we love in double barrel ale amplified. Rye is an interesting grain, and you know this if you have rye breads. It tends to be, we say, a spicy grain.
Right.
Which means that it just has a little more kind of grainy spice essence, rustic characteristic. But the hook there is this, basically we knew we were going to rye whiskey barrels. So let's get into this beer. Oh man, I do get the rye spice. It's really interesting.
It's there, just that small 10% in the mash bill, and then again, going in the rye whiskey barrels.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the barrels that
But yeah, as Matt was saying, that malt bill, those beautiful caramelized malts and whatnot, they bring really great biscuity, sweet butterscotch notes to it. And we knew we were going to be getting some high rye whiskey barrels, add a little bit of rye to the actual mash bill. And all that came to be and was thought of to add that slight spice bourbon characteristic to kind of play and balance out really well with the toffee, butternut, kind of like sweeter bread notes.
Yeah.
Just to kind of a little something, a little addition, another layer to the entire beer. So once the beer was done fermenting in stainless, again, we received a load of freshly dumped high rye bourbon, high rye whiskey barrels here at the brewery. Got that beer straight from the fermenter directly into those barrels, probably less than a week after they arrived, and then laid them down in those high rye whiskey for, I think it was around a year or so in barrel.
I get the rye, but I also just get this rounded barrel character. I get a lot of, it doesn't come across super boozy. It just has this well integrated warming characteristic. I mean, opposed to our stouts, you have this beer that doesn't have a lot of roast barley. It does have a touch for color and for complexity, but I get more of what I get with barley wines, which is just this warm, round, just lush characteristic. The hops that went into this are essentially noble cultivars, although grown. It's a mix of some European cultivars, but also some Willamette hops grown in the Pacific Northwest that have a very noble characteristic. Again, very similar to what we use in double barrel ale. Wonderful beer.
One more thing to add really quick too is the balance of this beer. The rye whiskey barrels were 10-year-old, so you get a little more like oak characteristic, and you get a little bit of like oak, slight like tannin that just adds to a little bit of the texture in the mouthfeel.
Yeah.
Which again,
as you know, when we make regular double barrel ale, we're doing primary fermentation in new medium toast American oak, which is actually quite aggressive in its tannin, delivery to the beer. And in fact, we have to blend that down with stainless steel to kind of find a balancing point. And this time we're kind of finding it through the secondary barrel aging in a different way, but it's there for sure. Yeah. So, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit more about the bottling, and I'll shout out to Jim Classic from our packaging crew and the team in the packaging crew, because we don't normally run this bottle on our regular packaging lines. And in fact, it took a couple rounds of filling, pretty complicated because one, it's a different shape, doesn't fit on any bottles. We started with one of the local breweries' smaller Maheen lines trying to fill it, and it was just going so slow, and it was so labor intensive that we then switched to a mobile packaging line, which we called in, set up out on the street, and Jim Classic and his crew ran that. And this opaque bottle, although it's so gorgeous, is a real challenge because you can't see where the fill height is. So when you're actually packaging into these, it takes a lot of skill. So shout out to the crew for getting that done. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If you like that bottle, we might be able to talk the team into doing that again.
That's right.
So anything else on this beer?
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely love this beer. Of course, double DBA without rye has been in the family. It's been released on its own. It's been part of the anniversary blend. And so it's well woven into the story of our barrel program for sure.
Yeah. I guess one more thing we can add is we actually are doing a much bigger batch. Of double DBA for next year, I believe.
Yeah. So it ended up falling on our batch 10,000. You might have heard us talking about that a little bit on social media, and will be released next year. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, stoked.
All right, so the next beer out of the Lion's Den group of 500 ml bottles that we sent out is the Imperial Walker's Reserve. So the last time we brewed this was back in 2015, and one of our near and dear friends, who's also a club member, Dustin Core, who we refer to as Little D, because our head brewer, Dustin Krull, is Big D.
There we go.
Back in the day, he used to be a brewer here, and he came back and joined us for our 5,000th batch, or batch 5,000, which was a reboot of Walker's Reserve Porter. In fact, it was called Black Barrel Porter way back in the day. It became Walker's Reserve Porter when we released it in bottle the first time. And then, with the help of Dustin Krull, our head brewer, we reformulated this into a bit of a Rauch beer, kind of a beautiful smoked version of this porter beer. And, making smoked porters is by no means our invention. There are some wonderful examples of this style. One that comes to mind is smoked Alaskan porter from Juneau, Alaska. That's won many Great American Beer Festival awards. In fact, maybe more awards than any other single beer. So that's certainly an inspiration. But going all the way back, Black Barrel Porter was a beer that was originally fermented in the Union. It was made way back when we were brewing back in Santa Barbara County. It was a recipe that transferred up here to Paso Robles, and we started brewing it, eventually released it in 22-ounce bottles. We bottle conditioned that beer. That beer also got barrel treatment. I mean, there's a real story. It was really part of our early DNA and was in many ways the first kind of somewhat specialty reserve beer that we ever released, long before barrel aging was ever a notion in this brewery. So when we got to batch 5000, we decided doing a special version of this was really cool and important for the brewery history, and bringing back one of our core brewers, no pun intended, was part of that journey. So a little bit of beach smoked malt is added to the beer, and smoke in beer, or that rauch flavor, is somewhat polarizing. And so it's really important to layer it in. And I think that, coupled with some barrel aging, helps mellow and integrate that character. You know, it's like smoked foods, like smoked salmon or anything like that. You know, when you choose the wood, you can use peat to smoke, and a lot of spirits are derived with peated malts, which can be pretty aggressive, pretty phenolic. Beech wood smoke tends to be a little more mellow on those phenolics, but you definitely get the smokehouse character.
Yeah, you get the essence.
Yeah. And so you should be able to pick that up in the aroma early on. Now, we differentiate our porters from stouts, and it's not like we make a ton of porters, but we typically differentiate them by the specialty malts used. We may use more sweet side caramel malts, more chocolate malt versus really deep roast malt. So you would tend to get more chocolatey characters and less of that real roast, dark, bitter chocolate character in our porters. Bring back memories. See, I'm a big Rauch malt fan.
As am I. Yeah.
There's one city in Germany, Bamberg, in Franconia, that still is, you know, it's like one of the original and last bastions of Rauch beer. Brewers like Spezial, Schlinkela are famous for their Rauch beers, and they use the same malt.
It just takes me back. I mean, I love the Bamberg as well.
Yeah.
And the different levels of smokiness that a lot of those breweries have. And like Matt says, that smoke element can be overwhelming. So we definitely use just enough where it's there, but it's not overpowering.
Yeah.
You can appreciate it and really enjoy it.
Yeah. I don't know. Tell us a little bit about the barrels that you used in this brew.
Yeah, then with this one, knowing that there was going to be that slight smoky element along with some nice chocolate notes from the base, we brought in some 8-year-old George Dickel Tennessee whiskey barrels, which I love about that Tennessee whiskey. I mean, it's charcoal filtered. You definitely get a little more sweet elements, and that plays really well off that slight smoky element, campfire smoke of the base beer. Spent about a year in barrel, really rounded out the flavors and just interacted so beautifully with the base beer itself.
Yeah, I don't think that smoke sticks out like a sore thumb at all. And I'm getting a little bit of the sweet background and the rounded edges. You know, porter to me, again, just in my mind, I think, you know, we typically think of beers that aren't quite as complex and were originally crafted to be, you know, session beers before there were pale ales in the UK. In fact, you know, the porters were made to be the drinking beers of the time. They just happened to be really dark. This, of course, is a higher gravity version of it. You know, we hit 11+% alcohol, so it's certainly an Imperial version. But I think it has a little bit more of that kind of almost like too drinkable for its strength of qualities.
It's fun. I mean, I'm just leaning back towards the childhood memory, and even I think a couple weeks ago we're doing s'mores. I mean, you get that graham cracker,
the smoke,
that toasty, sweet marshmallow with a really nice piece of chocolate. I mean,
And the campfire smoke.
and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just love porters, and we don't really have an opportunity to brew them as often as I might like. You know, I think this would actually be quite food friendly. Again, you know, think charcoal meats or smoked fish or cheeses. That, you know, some of these smoked cheeses would be really fun to pair with this. I can think of a bunch of ideas.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
desserts. I mean, there's.
Yeah, so again, in a 500 ml bottle, it's a little bit rare, so give us your feedback.
And don't forget about the dinner. The dinner we're going to be doing for
Oh,
the
speaking
Lions
of
Den.
pairing, yeah, beers and food. So we have this dinner set up in the Barrel Room in Buellton coming up in September. Keep your eyes open for those tickets going on sale very soon. Eric's definitely going to be in attendance for that.
You know it.
It should be a lot of fun. Yeah, so that's the Lions Den collaboration of all sorts of things. You know, we already talked about the beer that we did with Highland Park. That's kind of the trio of 500 ml bottles. I think these are some of the coolest beers we made they're released
So
this
fun.
year. I say
And
that
the
every time, right?
packaging too. I
Yeah,
mean, that
the
was a
packaging
pain,
is
but they are
definitely
beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Cheers.
Nice work, Eric. Hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks so much.